Amazing. We're recording, mate. Well, yeah, Marlon, first of all, mate, as mentioned, really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Um, and you were just saying some nuggets as well, so maybe we can come back to those nuggets in a sec. But yeah, for anyone that's like watching this video at some point in the future, do you want to just like give them and me like a background of like you, where you were, as where you started out in the industry?
Sure. Yeah, briefly, I came out of college in 2010, 11. I did 2 years doing plumbing and heating, and I spent a year doing electrical. This was the time of the recession, so there weren't many opportunities. Ended up having to do a bit of volunteering with a heating company, which I did for a few weeks, and then decided, okay, I've had a go, but I do actually need to earn some money. Went onto site as a labourer, managed to save up enough money to get by, to survive. At that point, it was just about surviving, quite frankly. I then picked up a job as a plumber's mate, which was a bit of a lifesaver because then I could actually survive and put a bit of money aside. That allowed me to save, get an MVQ level two in plumbing, and then my earnings shot up, and I had a little bit of breathing space, sort of for the first time in my life,
Yeah.
really. Um, so yeah, I was on site. All my background really is mostly commercial and industrial, sort of plumbing, pipe fitting. Um, and got to a point where I thought this is quite easy. I think I can do more. Did a few additional certs. Did an MVQ3 in site supervision. I did my triple STS. Moved up into site supervision. Did that for about 7, 8 months. And in the meantime, I again I was thinking, do you know what? I can go a step further and move up into mechanical project management.
Yeah.
So I was taking the time to do additional learning about VRF, stroke aircon systems, ventilation systems, commissioning of systems. Funnily enough, BMS. All
Yeah.
of the areas we don't really touch upon on a pipework side of the things I started acquiring a bit of knowledge on. Um, got a role as a project manager. My first role was running the mechanical package on a job out in Wembley, a university, massive
Yeah.
project. And just on that, I would say is sometimes it's really important to prepare for your next opportunity and back yourself and don't be afraid to fail because I
Mm.
genuinely didn't think I would get that Wembley job. I thought, okay, I think I've got good industry experience. My CV probably looks pretty decent. I can see why they've brought me in for an interview, but I thought it's probably just a bit too big for me. If it was like a little office fit out, I thought, yeah, I've got a really good shot here. But I genuinely thought, you know what? It's a bit too big for me. But now with these roles, I've always been freelance. With these roles
Oh, I was
now,
going
I
to
know
ask. That was you
exactly,
as a contractor. That was
exactly,
okay. Yeah.
exactly. And I was like, well, do you know what? Now I'm going to have interviews for these roles. This next step, everything is going to have at least one interview. So I
Mm.
thought, do you know what? Let me go to the interview for the experience. It was
Yes.
that
Yes,
it
mate.
was
Exactly.
it was out in Gloucester. I'm in London. Gloucester is,
Was
oh
it?
God,
Wow.
it's not,
The
it's the
mission.
other side of the country. But I thought, you know
Yeah.
what, I'll do it just for the experience more than anything, not actually thinking I'd
Yeah.
get the job. But then it turned out I did really well in the interview. All of the learning I'd been doing about, broader mechanical systems sort of paid off. Got the job. So that was my first PM gig. Did a few more projects. I've done a hospital, I've done a data center, running a mechanical package, done a few bits and pieces. And that sort of brings us through to where we are now. Only other thing I would say is that once I started as a mechanical project manager, I then thought, you know what, I need to get the electrical side up and going
Mm.
again. Did a year of it at college, but hadn't really done anything at all since then. So I thought, let me get going on that again. So I sort of dove into the electrical side of things. Did my 18th edition. I did the 2396 level four electrical design qualification, which was
Yeah.
really hard. So brought that up to speed. And then yeah, that sort of brings us up to the present,
Yeah.
just in terms of from a background point of view. And then onto the BMS. One of the things that obviously I was doing as I started learning about
Mm.
broader systems, BMS commissioning, these were things which on site I'd always been around, but I hadn't really ever been involved. And what you find is that mechanical contractors on site, BMS is always part of our package because it essentially controls our HVAC system, but no one mechanically really understands or knows really actually knows BMS. None of us do really. Um, so it would always be a case of, although I'm the package manager working for a massive sort of mechanical installation company, we just bring people in, leave the BMS to them, and we're sort of hands off, just leave those guys to it. So for me as a package manager, I always felt a bit uncomfortable in that you always feel a little bit vulnerable because there's a part of the
Mm,
package here which I don't really know, I don't really
right.
understand. I can't really give any pushback if a contractor wants to come and tell me any nonsense. So that was one of the
Yeah.
key things that drove me on to say, right, do you know what? I really need to jump
And
on the
sorry,
BMS.
but are you ultimately in this role? You're still responsible for the BMS as part of the mechanical package. So it is
Yes,
still your responsibility.
always. Yeah.
Right,
So
right.
the
And you're
BMS
just
is
relying on the BMS guys.
exactly. So this is never, it's not within the electrical package. BMS is strictly within the mechanical package. But
Okay.
mechanical companies, mechanical people generally don't really understand BMS. It's just that simple.
Hmm.
So even mechanical companies would bring people in and it's sort of, they know what they're doing, leave them to it. Don't worry, Marlon, it'll all be fine. That kind of
Yeah.
thing, which is not the best situation to be in, to say the least.
Yeah, I bet it's a low level anxiety when not knowing things and that you know that it's your responsibility ultimately. The buck stops at you. Yeah, I can relate, mate.
Absolutely. So yeah, that pretty much is background up to now, and it's funny because the role I've got now, um, I think it just shows that there are opportunities in the industry. Because although my background is M&E, I've been a mechanical and electrical project manager. That is completely separate and distinct from BMS still. So it's not
Well,
the case.
that. Sorry to jump in, mate. I think that's
Sure.
that's key, mate, because that's kind of what led to this conversation, didn't it? You
Mm,
you messaged me the other day, and like for anyone that's watching in the future, like Marlon is one of like the OGs, like one of our OG clients that like just came on board with us like early days. And yeah, messaged me the other day. Just well, we can go through it.
mm,
Just saying that he's landed a role as a BMS project manager, which I want to get into the details of that in a sec, mate. But before we do that, I
sure.
just want to go back a couple of steps. So
Sure.
that's
Sure.
kind of like the journey that you've sort of taken up till now. It's mainly been like mechanical, with a bit of electrical as well, and like
Yes.
in a contracting role, and then
Correct.
sort of subbing stuff out to the BMS guys. So
Mhm,
when you started subbing out the BMS, was that
mhm.
around the time that you discovered us and you were sort of diving into that and wanting to learn more about it? Well, how did that come about and how did you discover us?
Sure. Well, just to be crystal clear with subbing out the BMS, that wouldn't have been me personally. So I'd be on site representing a mechanical
Sorry,
contractor. I'd
yeah,
be
yeah,
running the whole mechanical package, and they would
yeah,
be electing the particular subbies that came onto the
got you,
job. So they
got
would
you.
select a
Okay,
BMS contractor to come on. But
yeah,
yeah, that absolutely was around the time because I was being
because you're on the
exposed to
Loxon
things.
course as well, weren't you?
I
It
was,
was the
yeah, yeah.
Loxon. Yeah. Okay.
There was a lot of things I was being exposed to which I was just unfamiliar with. So one of the things I was doing was looking around, looking online. I found yourself online and some of your videos, and you kind of led me to Loxon essentially.
Yeah.
I sort of found
Okay.
you first and then found Loxon and thought, well, if it's a real area of interest, bearing in mind that I'm a contractor, you've always got to be open to different kinds of opportunities. So I thought, let me go and do the course, get my head around that. That could be quite handy in future. Um, but yeah, I think your videos were really, really good. The schematic videos were really, really good. I found it quite engaging. There was a little bit of a dearth of BMS content. What I found is that a lot of the BMS content out there is quite bland, quite frankly. Um,
Yeah.
there's a couple of like sites I've been to. I won't name them, but they're quite. The information's there. Don't get me wrong,
Mm.
but it's bland. It's not very engaging. I think the good thing about your content is that, well, A, it's interesting, it's engaging, and you feel like you're sort of engaging with a person through the content rather than just being given bland information.
Well, thank you,
So
mate.
yeah,
Much appreciated.
on my little search, I came across a number of different sources. Your one was really good. Found some funny pages from India that seemed really promising, but then they were in like Hindi and you couldn't understand anything, or The English,
Yeah,
the accent was so bad. I genuinely just, this seems really good, but I honestly just, I can't understand what you're saying, mate.
I know
So
what
your
you mean.
stuff was good. I could understand it. It was in English. And yeah, it was interesting. It was engaging, and it was relevant. It was relevant. It wasn't.
What
And you
what
talk
was?
about this. Sorry, go
Sorry,
on.
mate. I didn't mean to cut you.
No, so something you also talk about is like the manufacturer spiel you get on their training courses, and I think yours was so. It was so like fundamental. I'd say to anyone, once they go through the sort of learning process and the things that you deliver, you begin to understand. I only understood this like going through your material, going through the course, which is that in a way, the manufacturer is irrelevant. Like the particular brand you use is kind of irrelevant. What's much more important is that you understand like the nuts and bolts fundamentally how a system works, how relays work. Don't obsess over normally open and normally closed. What really matters is, are you making switches? Are you breaking switches and directions of current flow? Like those
Yeah.
core principles mean you in theory, I felt after doing like going through your training, I felt, I can design a system from the ground up. And if it turned out it needed to be KNX or Loxon or Niagara or whatever, I'd be confident to say, do you know what, I can just sub out to a specialist in the area. But I know the system, I understand the system,
Mm.
and that core knowledge is something I think you do a good job in getting across.
Thank you, mate. And I'd love to get your perspective on this because, as you know, I used to work at Loxon, right? So I see how it is from the perspective of a manufacturer and how they kind of like market things.
Mm,
And I don't want to kind of influence you in any way, but like that is kind of why I felt that like the manufacturers they don't really give people what they need to be able to do project delivery.
absolutely not.
Like you just because I used to deliver the trainings at Loxon, like 4 or
Yes.
5 days on the software. People would go and like they would almost feel like the marketing would be like, oh yeah, you'll be a smart home installer or BMS installer after the training. But
Yeah.
like, and this is what I get and I harp on about it and I get really passionate about it. So I'm going to go off on one for a second, mate, if you don't mind. But I'd like to
No,
get
go
your
for it. Go
perspective
for
on
it.
this, like, and your
Sure.
honest perspective of this as well, and how you feel about it. But like with the manufacturers, and it does not just Loxon, it's any manufacturer. They
Mm.
focus on the PLC programming, the software, which, in my opinion, and I'd love to hear your take on this, it's kind of the final layer. But if you don't understand like what you were touching on, the fundamentals, the schematics, like the project delivery step by step, the design, the panel build, like you can't even get to that stage. So like people come onto these manufacturer trainings and they jump ahead and they skip all of this massive section and just get
Mm.
into the programming and they think that they're going to be able to deliver projects by the end of it. And
Yeah.
so you've been on a Loxon training. I'd love to
Yes.
like what's your perspective on that?
Well, I would think, and I'm not just saying this for the sake of saying it. I've got no reason to make stuff up or lie, but I would genuinely, honestly say, if it was a throw up between I want to get into BMS engineer, BMS commissioning engineer, PM, whatever, and the throw up is go and do a Loxon course or go and do your course, it would be your course every single day of the week because it gives you the core understanding you need to actually deliver a project. And it goes back to something I just lightly touched on earlier in that it doesn't really matter what manufacturer you end up going with. If you need to, you can sub that out. The program of a PLC, if you need to, initially you could sub that out. But like you say, you're not going to get anywhere near that stage if you cannot actually deliver a project and understand the core fundamentals of how a system works. Loxon, I think, are really, really good in terms of the branding, the marketing. You
Mm.
could do a case study on how well they present things and put things together. And you will leave that course thinking you really know a lot. Like you will leave that course thinking you're ready to take on the world. But it's not until I think you go a little bit more in depth, like with some of the material that you offer, is when you realize, oh, hold on a minute, actually, I don't actually know what I thought I knew. Um, so yeah, they do a really good job. I understand they've got a sort of financial prerogative to push their product. I get that.
Hmm.
They market well, they
Yeah.
deliver well. I get that. But I would say to people, don't be blinded. A 5 day course in anything is never going to get you competent. Let's just live in the real world. Um, and I would
Yeah.
argue and say that five days at Loxon, it doesn't even truly get you competent in Loxon systems. You may leave thinking you are, but there's a million different, settings and elements of configuration you're not yet familiar with or haven't been exposed to. Don't run away from having to learn that core fundamental knowledge. If you look at a relay and think, what the hell is this thing with all these different ports on? What the hell is that? Is that a light? Is that a button? Just just go through it, suffer through it, embrace the process. You need to learn the core fundamentals. And I've looked around, I looked far and wide, and for me, like what you put together was the best there was out there for getting across that core knowledge, relevant core knowledge in an interesting and engaging fashion.
Thank you, mate. And yeah, this is not knocking locks on at all because they actually do have a great product and great
Mm.
software, great yeah, just a whole. They are good. There's certain things that annoy me, but generally speaking, they're really good. But it's just the same for. It's the same for any manufacturer, not just locks on. It's kind of
Yeah.
the same thing. Um, appreciate you saying that, mate. What? So what was the goal? Like back then, like when you were starting to look into BMS and starting to get an
Hmm.
wanting to sort of, I guess, hold these BMS contractors accountable and know what
Sure.
they were doing. What was the goal for you? Was that it really, or was there something bigger further down the line that you wanted to do?
It was twofold. So one was yes, getting that competency, that basic competency, so I could, have some level of authority over my
Yeah,
subcontractors. And the other thing was always seeing it as an additional string to my bow, something I can go out there into the world and provide value, another skill set which could allow me to either go into consulting or set up my own dedicated BMS company at some point in the future. So the immediate focus was get the knowledge and skills to be competent to aid my ability to run BMS packages. And then a side benefit of that was, well, this could also benefit me in future, open up another income stream, and just give me another area of the industry that I can go into.
and why specifically BMS?
Why BMS? Well, I think
This role.
beyond the necessity of that being the only part of my sort of mechanical area I was least familiar with, BMS and controls is the future of everything to do with building services. Whenever we talk about net zero and carbon emissions, efficiency plays a massive role in that. And how do we deliver efficient systems? Well, it's controls that make systems efficient. Um, and so I think that the future for BMS is just there. It's an area which is only going to grow. And I think generally, wherever you are in terms of your working life, it's always advantageous to be in an industry that's growing, that has a future. And so I think, yeah, that's sort of what I would say on that. Like
Yeah,
controls, automation, BMS, is the future. And really good thing about it is that you did a video on this, an extended video, which I watched a couple of times. There's so many different areas you can branch into, so many different industries you can branch into. So if there's a slowdown or a recession, a recession can't impact all of the areas spread across BMS. It's just not possible. You might find that, okay, high-end residential will dip. Okay, great. But if you've got a sea, sorry, like a bloody submarine that needs controls. You're going to have
yeah,
certain buildings that need security, so that's not going to change. You're going to have very
yeah,
large buildings whereby they're so large, they use up so much energy. It's critical they have controlled, well controlled systems, or they're just bleeding 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 a year. So there'll always be areas where there is a necessity for controls. So I think
yeah.
it's a great sort of field to move into and to be in.
Yeah, mate, that is, and that's what gets me so fired up and passionate about like this, the skill set that we talked about earlier, like the fundamentals and the project delivery, like it's the same thing, the same process, whether you're doing commercial buildings, like specifically building management systems, whether you're doing, like you touched on, high-end residential, but then all of the industrial sectors, whether
Mm,
it's nuclear, whether it's oil and gas, whether it's pharmaceuticals, manufacturing,
mhm.
automotive, like it's just, yeah. like so that's a really good point. I've never thought about it that way. Like if one area goes into recession, you can just jump ship into another sector, another industry, and it's just
Exactly.
transferable skills.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, mate, let's jump back forward to kind of like where you're at now. So that's what you were doing back then. You got a better understanding then of BMS, like when you were, or let's actually stay where we were. So you got a better understanding of BMS when you were doing project management, and then how have kind of things
Mhm.
developed from then to where you are now then?
I mean, to be fair, I've just kept on a learning curve. For example, um, I've just kept dipping into it sporadically, like now and then, just to maintain that knowledge, top that knowledge up. Um, and I think
But
that
have
one of the
you, sorry,
things,
mate, that was a bad question. Have you been a project manager like from then when we kind of like met, a couple of years
yes,
ago, to you've been that project manager like with that
yes,
developing BMS skill set throughout that time to where you are
yes,
now then?
yes,
Got you.
exactly, exactly, yeah. So I
Cool.
think I just finished a project over in central London where I was running a district heating sort of installation. Um, and even we didn't get to the point of doing the BMS because I was dealing all of the sort of pre-construction and enabling works. But even there, just being able to engage with professionals about controls, about BMS, and being able to offer control solutions, just sat down in a meeting, it makes such a massive difference to your credibility.
Mm.
Um, it makes a massive difference. So yeah, I've just been plugging away at it, just making sure I kept that core knowledge there. Even when I was on projects like the last one, for example, where it wasn't required because we were really early doors,
Yeah.
um, even then it had a positive impact. So yeah, love it.
Cool. All right, man. Well, yeah, let's fast forward to like present day, and this is so. I just want to get to that message that you sent me, which was like just out of the blue. It was so. I think I got it. I read it on a Monday or a Sunday. I was like, oh man, that's so cool to read. So thanks for sharing that with me. But
No
like
worries.
ultimately, it was like, yeah, just thought I'd let you know. Just secured a role as a project engineer, a BMS project engineer for 6 months.
Hmm.
390 per day, which
Mm,
is bloody impressive. And that's the kind of like opportunities that this
mm,
skill set can get you, you know.
mm,
So yeah, I was like, mate, that's incredible. So what the question is, what made you want to go from what you were doing
hmm.
to like fully getting into BMS as a project manager now?
I think to be fair, it's things we've sort of touched on previously. I think that one is, I think BMS is it's a bit peculiar what I'm gonna say. It might seem a little bit contradictory, but BMS is a growing and expanding area, but at the same time, it's a very niche area, and so being there is one of the like the best places you can be from a working perspective when you're in an industry that's growing, but the skill set required isn't that commonly distributed amongst people.
Yeah.
It's an area to a lot of people. It just seems a bit strange, a bit unusual, a bit bizarre. Um, so it was really about moving away from the slightly more generic M&E into the more specialized, focused niche area of BMS. I think that was a sort of key driver looking at the next sort of
Why did
10,
you want to do that? Why did you want to do that then though? Like, was it just, was it just the opportunity presents itself? Like, what made you make
yeah,
that leap?
yeah. I mean, I felt that the M&E side of things had run its course, and I'd done pretty much as I really wanted to.
Right.
And I thought it was time for, I don't know, in some ways just a sideways step. I see it as a diagonally upward step,
Yeah.
um, in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, it was really about that next stage of progression, I think. Um, there was also, I think, looking just going through job listings, it was also the earnings. Um, the BMS roles generally the equivalents to M&E compared, the BMS is always better, almost always from what I see, from what I've observed over an extended period of time. Um, so I'm on
And
390,
what
like 400, 450 is not unusual. at
for
all.
for people on 6 month contracts.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. 450. He's 550. I've seen as well.
Yeah,
There'd be what I would say is when you to get to sort of 500, 550, they do ask that you have specific experience in particular packages. Niagara is a very, very common one.
yeah,
Trend you see a lot, but not massively nowadays. This tech comes up every now and then. So I see it as being able to establish myself within BMS, then I may well perhaps go on a Niagara training course and just niche down even more. And that's when the roles are, 500, 550, even 600. Um, so the earning side of things is something that I really like. And then another thing that ties into somewhat coincidentally with like BMS, and it's a little bit similar with like system commissioning, is that the projects tend to be, or they can be, relatively short term, but they pay very, very well. Now, for
yeah.
someone like me, I don't want to be like throughout the course of the year, 9 to 5 at work, like fixed in a particular place. That's not for me. So I much like the idea where I can say, right, I'm going to do 2 projects this year. Each of them is 4 months, 6 months, 8 months,
Mm,
but I can have a month off afterwards and do other smaller jobs at my own leisure, rather than having to be at work every single day. That is another thing that made me veer towards BMS. The great opportunities for remote working, also is another
yeah,
thing that played on my mind. So a number of factors actually.
love it, man. So how did this opportunity come about that you've got now?
Well, it came about. What I started doing was, as I was taking an interest in BMS, I thought to myself, well, how do we start that sort of reaching out process? So the first thing I did was I amended my CV. And I just made I put more of an emphasis on the sort of commissioning side of things, and I put the names of some of the major systems in the CV so it was sort of
Mm,
sharp in the searches.
yeah,
Um, and that led to me starting to get phone calls and emails for BMS roles. I didn't leap
getting
straight in.
headhunted, mate.
Well, you could
That's
say
what
that.
happens though. Like if you were saying the right things in the CV, like people do, they're like,
Yeah.
fuck, this guy is, and like, sorry mate, I'm gonna jump in here. Like you said a second ago, it's like it's a growing industry.
Mhm.
There's limited amount of people, resources, people with skill sets in there. So as soon as like there's a new person on the block that's saying the right things, like recruiters,
Mm.
agencies, they're like, fucking, we need him to serve our client because there's not enough people.
Yeah, there is. There isn't. I started getting phone calls. It was quite funny. I remember one phone call in particular where they started asking me like BMS related questions. It was clear they were reading off a script and didn't really know anything.
Yeah.
And it was pretty clear
Yeah.
they've got like a list of questions, they've got a list of buzzwords or keywords, and as you're sort
Yeah.
of rifling them off, there's like tick, 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 you could just see it happening in the background. But yeah, started
Yeah.
getting phone calls, started getting emails, and then I actually started applying to BMS roles. So BMS project manager was something I was keen to jump into, because I felt I can definitely do that. I know about big projects. I know about project management. I know about M&E. The only thing I don't have yet is very, very specific skill set in a particular package, but that can come
That's
after.
easy
So,
though, mate. That's
so
so
that knocked
easy.
me out of the commissioning engineering roles, specifically the 550s and the 600s. But I thought that's
Yeah.
fine. This step comes first. I can then come to that after.
Yeah.
Um, and so I saw this job online, applied for it. Agency got in touch with me, asked to send my CV off. I said that's fine, that's no problem. Came back to me. Are they really interested? They really like the look of your CV. Can you do a Zoom meeting? Yep, no problem. Arranged that. Had the Zoom meeting. That went well. It was unlike any interview I've ever had. It was like 30, 40 minutes of just technical questions. You open up a panel, what's inside, what does
Hmm.
what happens.
Yeah.
Um, you know, it, it was nice though, because I felt like I had acquired the skill and the knowledge, a large bulk of it from your training to get through it, and it went well. And I was actually really happy when we got to a point where we said, he goes, do you know what? For a mechanical person, your knowledge is really good. He goes, I'm looking through your CV. You haven't actually done that much BMS, but for a mechanical person, you got really good knowledge. So went away, came back to me, come have an in-person interview in their office in sort of central London. Now, one of the things I did, what was interesting was it was loads of BMS, and then he sort of said, "Oh, by the way, we've also got the networking package. What do you know about networks?" I says, "Well, I know about BACnet, but yeah, not a massive amount in terms of working experience." So I
Yeah,
did mention a couple of the things I did know in terms of buzzwords, and he's asked me simple
yeah.
things like what's a LAN network, what's a VLAN, sort of simple stuff I kind of knew. He just touched on it very lightly. So I knew coming into the second meeting, I thought, you know what, let me brush up on the networking side of things just in case it comes up. Had the second interview. The second one was a little bit more of a formality. There was a more senior person in that meeting as well, sort of via the TV screen. And that was more about, tell us what motivates you, what drives you, how do you see things panning out each day on site, etc., etc. But then we did get into a little bit of networking, and I sort of sneaked in or snuck in, however the hell you put it, um,
Yeah.
that you might have a router or a switch, and that your main control panel that'll be fed via a router or a switch, and that's something like you have layer two switches, which is like MAC address level, and your layer three is your sort of ISP level, and I think he quite like that. When I sort of spoke in those terms, they quite like that. But again, these are things which I just took the time to sit down, go through, have a look at, like sitting through a couple of hours of sensible content, making notes, you can take in so much. So I prepared, and as a result of
Yeah,
preparing, the second interview
yeah.
was very much a formality. Um,
Like some people don't
yeah.
even, it's too daunt like you said right at the start. Like, and I was thinking about this the other day, like playing it safe. Like that first like project management role where
Mm.
you felt, oh, this is maybe a little bit too big a swing for me. But you
Yeah,
went for it anyway for the experience.
yeah,
And like, it doesn't matter if I don't get it. It's
exactly.
just a learning, it's experience. And that's the same thing with so many things. It's just like
Mm,
it's so sad that people let whatever, and I get it, like I understand why, but it's like it's the thing that's stopping you from getting to where you truly want to get to is like,
mm,
the fear of looking silly or failing. But
yeah,
like it's just reframing the way that you look at it, like you've
yeah,
just articulated. It's an experience, you learn from it, you get better,
mm,
and
yeah.
yeah, it's just
So it's
I wish more people were like that.
yeah.
You're muted, mate.
When I got that first um, PM role, um, sorry, just 1 second.
Yeah, yeah, no worries, man.
Um,
Yeah, sorry, mate. It's going on a bit. We'll wrap things up in a second, Marlon.
no worries. So yeah, I think when I look at that first role that I got as a mechanical project manager that sort of set me on the path, I didn't really get that because I did anything necessarily special or amazing or fantastic. All I did was spend the time to prepare, gaining knowledge, making notes of things, which allowed me to, and then just taking that chance of saying, I don't really care if I don't get it. Like not being afraid of rejection, I think is a big thing. Not
Yes.
being afraid
Yeah.
of failure. So I think for a lot of people out there, I would say, don't fear failure so much. The people you know of in life who are some of the most, richest, most well-known, most successful, many of these guys failed businesses multiple times. The people who always are billionaires and they all failed numerous times, numerous
Yeah.
times. And just I know it's not as a very slight aside, I think one of the things I think is useful for us is this American type mindset. There's a reason why they innovate so much and they do so much and they create so much. They have a they embrace failure. That they're not afraid
Yeah.
to swing big, to swing heavy. And do you know what? If I lose, I lose. That's fine. There are winners, there are losers. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But
Yeah.
ultimately, very often that's better than just playing it safe.
Yeah.
That's so much better than playing it safe. I'm sure you've said things to this effect. It's so much better to have a go, give it a shot, not quite get there, rather than just plod along, same old, and then 10, 15, 20 years later, you say, what could I have done? What could have been?
That's the biggest fear for me, mate. Like I don't want to, I'd never want to get to like my 70s, 80s when it's too late really to make proper changes and look back with regret because I let those fears and anxieties hold me back at the time. Because everyone feels those fears, those anxieties. It's just what you decide to do with with them there, you know. You
Yeah.
acknowledge them and you carry on, you know, you muster up the courage to just get through it and carry on,
Mm.
or you let them stop you from really getting to where you want to get to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you make a really good. You've done videos dedicated just to like mindset, not being afraid of failure, and I think that's critical for anyone who's thinking of taking a jump up or into a different industry. Your attitude carries you. It is critical to how far you get. It's like 80% of where you get to is down really to attitude
Yeah.
and how you apply yourself. So just very briefly, whilst I was working my way up, doing MBQs and this and that, and doing extra certificates, in the background, via the Open University, I was working towards a master's in engineering. So I now have a master's in engineering. But
Oh,
do you
there
know
you
what?
go. Got that as well.
Do you know what? Really, when I think about the key things that have allowed me to progress, it's not a master's in engineering. It's not an NVQ level 4. It's not an NVQ level 3. There may be some key things like my NVQ 2 in plumbing actually was probably a big one because that got me on site and gave me my
Yeah.
first professional role. But outside of that, really and truthfully, most of my benefits and gains have come from learning things, YouTube, notes, finding people like you online, and not being afraid to fail. So if you're out there and you think, okay, maybe I don't have that many certs, I've got lots of certs and lots of qualifications, and I'm telling you, most of it doesn't matter. Most of it gets you in the door, great, but that's not the key thing. That's not the main thing. How you apply yourself, being brave, being bold, and being fearless will get you further than bits of paper.
Yeah.
And that's something I think more people need to take on board. I've met so many of the people you're talking about, those terrified people. I've met them. There are people who, when I was like a plumber's mate, I became an installer, I became a project manager, and then I see these people coming onto my jobs. I'm like, mate, what's going on? I've come, and it was this fear of, oh, I can't go up and be a supervisor. I can't communicate well enough. I don't know enough. I don't know this. I don't know that.
Hmm.
But did you throw yourself in and just see?
Yeah.
That's the
Did you
thing. Did you
try?
just throw yourself in and see? And if you get fried, what's the worst that will happen? You go back to where you were before.
And you learn something. And the thing is, like we talk about failure, like you know the successful people that you touched on earlier, like they failed multiple times. Well, they didn't. I see it through the lens of well, they didn't actually fail because they got to where
Mm.
they got to in the end because they didn't let like setbacks stop them. You only fail
Oh
in
yeah,
my
yeah,
mind when you stop, when you give
yeah,
in,
yeah,
when
yeah,
you
yeah.
say, "Oh, it's too hard. It's taking too long. I give up." That's when you fail.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah, yeah,
mate.
absolutely.
You you just hit that like I really like sort of rounding these conversations off with like what would your advice be to anyone that's looking to get to where you are now and like going through the being on the pathway that you've been on. I think you've kind of just nailed it, unless you have
Mm.
anything to add to what you've just said.
Not really. No. I mean, just to summarize, I'd say BMS will be a brilliant industry to be in. And if you're an electrician, or even if you're just not necessarily an electrician, but if you're in any way hands-on um, within construction, BMS is going to be one of the most biggest areas to be moving into. So run with that, embrace it, get the key skills, get the core knowledge. People such as yourself are a really, really good outlet for people to go and get the sort of really the fundamentals of what they need to really succeed rather. And lastly, just don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. You have to be bold. You have to be brave. You have to be prepared to lose. You have to
Yeah.
be prepared to have a knockback. You have to be prepared to have a setback, and just having that mental strength is what will allow you to get to where you want to get to. So Yeah,
Yeah,
just focus on that. And lastly, don't be obsessed with certs. Don't be obsessed with bits of paper. Just don't do it. And I'm really speaking to a person who thinks they're not enough, thinks they
yeah,
don't have enough, thinks they're lacking in so many ways. I would say worry about having the key core knowledge in the area you want to progress. And that will only ever be a handful of things. If someone did your course, for example, did 18th edition, did testing, and applied for like trainee BMS roles, they'd be in a really, really good position. They don't
yeah.
need all this other stuff. They don't even need 10, 15 years experience,
No.
So don't get dragged down because you haven't got certs. Just focus on what's the route for me to get to where I need to be, and just be relentless, and just go down that path.
Bang on, mate. And just to add on to that, it's like listening to people that haven't actually been where you want to get to.
Mm,
Don't listen to those people because they don't know.
absolutely.
And some people they don't want you to get to where you want to get to because then that puts the pressure on them. They look at themselves, oh, well, maybe I haven't done what I really wanted to do. So they want people to stay at their level or below. So they're not going to give you like the real golden nuggets of what you need to know. So yeah. Anyway, mate, just hang on the line one second, Marlon.
Okay,
But yeah, mate, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Like it does go a really long way in helping people and giving people like confidence in loads of different areas, mate. So thank you for taking the time to do this.
sure, no bother. Thanks a lot, Chris.
All right, mate.